The African National Congress's Secretary-General Fikile Mbalula says the party acknowledges that communities in the Western Cape feel neglected by it. Mbalula updated the media yesterday ahead of the party's 113th anniversary at the Mandela Park Stadium in Khayelitsha in Cape Town this weekend. The ANC has not been able to achieve majority support in the province since losing to the Democratic Alliance in the 2009 elections, where it won only 14 out of 42 seats. To talk more about what this weekend's event means for the ANC in the Western Cape, we joined virtually by Dr. Levy Ndou, a political analyst, and in studio we joined by Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC News Political Editor. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us and compliments to the new year.
A very good morning to you, Simpiwe. Good morning to Dr. Ndou.
It's an absolute pleasure having you both join us. Indeed, it's an absolute pleasure for you joining us this morning. Mzwai, I'm going to start with you. Sure. We've seen President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday at the commemoration of the SACP's former chair and as a General Secretary Joe Slovo commemoration in Soweto yesterday. And he was clutching at straws, trying to bind the alliance together. And he stopped short of begging the SACP not to go it alone in the local government election. So what do you make of that speech?
Well, as I sat and listened to the ANC president and then afterwards listened to Solly Mapaile, the General Secretary of the SACP, I couldn't help but realize that the train has really left the station in terms of the decision that the SACP has taken. I think it's a fait accompli. They're not turning back from what I see. I know that there are still meetings that are planned to discuss this, but I don't think the SACP could then overturn what is a Congress decision to go it alone. So clearly they will have to find a way of working together. But for me, Simpiwe, it would be very interesting to see when it's election time, because they will be now campaigning independently. Yes. So will that alliance be that strong in that context? Remember, we may be brothers, but if we want, we're competing for the same thing, so naturally we may create a bit of animosity. Maybe animosity is too strong a word, but that is what is going to happen. So this is a new realignment of politics in South Africa. And I think Sol even said it himself. He feels the current positions of the government and the governing party are sellout positions, and he's very open about it. So if that's how you feel, and then you get driven to then creating something that you believe would better serve you. So that's where we are at the moment. So I know they're still going to have the meetings. I know they're still going to tell us they are allies and all those things. But the fact of the matter is that the train has left the station.
When you say the train has left the station, is this an insinuation that the SACP is not looking back? They're not relenting. They're not backing down. They will pull away from the alliance.
How and when, it's perhaps a matter of discussion. But the fact of the matter is that they have decided they are going it alone. And 2026 is the start. I can even see them do it 2029.
All right. Dr. Ndou, let me also bring you into this conversation. What do you make of the tone of President Cyril Ramaphosa's speech yesterday, just clutching at straws, saying the SACP should not be leaving the tripartite alliance because that will be the death of the alliance?
It has become clear, as indicated by Mr. Mbeje, that the decision has been taken by the SACP to go it alone. And it's also a fact that this is a decision of Congress which could be very difficult to reverse. Even though there are discussions about other meetings that have to take place, it will also be very difficult for the leadership of the SACP to change the decision of conference. But at the same time, Ramaphosa appears to be appealing to the leadership of the SACP that they can still reverse their decision because there is still that room for negotiations that has to take place. But equally, we need to look at how these two parties are going to be contesting each other. But before contestation, I also want to see how the machinery of the SACP is going to take over the ground, in the sense that I strongly believe that we do not have strong and visible branches of the SACP in many wards in South Africa. So it will require the SACP to have a lot of work to do in terms of establishing functional branches and also ensuring that their members do not go onto the list of the ANC but remain in the list of the ANC. And the main task here for the leadership of the SACP for me would be to ensure that those that they are very sure of, that they are members of the SACP and not members of the ANC at the same time, should also be prioritized on those lists. So there is still a lot of activities that are supposed to take place, but the journey for me remains very, very long, and specifically for the SACP.
So are you foreseeing the beginning of an end of the tripartite alliance, or at least the SACP pulling out?
Both parties emphasizes that the alliance is still intact. They're still going to be cooperating, and one still has to wait and see on the modalities that they are going to employ in terms of how they are going to operate. When there is competition and you both competing, you end up having to, in one way or another, there is jealousy amongst those or in between those people that are competing. So when they talk about working together but still contesting each other, it becomes a bit tricky, because in some way they'll have to talk bad about each other, because that is in the nature of campaigning. So those are the issues that, in my view, they still have to deal with. But at the end of the day, my view is that because there are people who always maintained that the SACP is always on the back of the ANC and get positions through the ANC, this could also be an opportune time for the SACP to show its strength in the public and say, we are not just there in the alliance just to satisfy the needs of the few. We have got numbers, we've got support, and if indeed they bring something on the table in terms of the numbers, that is something that can still build the alliance even much stronger.
All right, Mzwai, the ANC is celebrating its 113th anniversary this coming weekend. In fact, tomorrow is the traditional January 8th statement. So do you see the party using this particular celebration to reaffirm its legacy and identity? And how does the party reconcile, its historical significance with the perception of it being out of touch with modern South Africans and modern South African challenges?
No, sure. I think before I answer that, Sim, let me just latch on what the doc has said, which I think is very interesting in terms of competing for the same voters, the SACP. You know, one of the things the SACP is really hoping will be able to achieve going forward, there's a lot of disgruntlement within the ANC about a number of other issues. Yes. And some of those people may not have a home. So having a party like the SACP, which is an alliance, may then provide that space to say, well, instead of sitting at home or voting for someone else, maybe let me vote someone who at least I know. Because, I mean, you even look at who was there at the Joslovo Memorial. So some of the senior ANC people, those who have, some of them who have expressed their dissatisfaction about the current state of affairs in the ANC. So that tells you. So that's why going forward, it will be very interesting to see how they actually work together. Because if, let's say, the SACP gets a huge number of votes, it's likely to would have got it from the ANC. And then to a question about the celebration that we are speaking about tomorrow. Of course, the ANC would want to reaffirm itself as the leader of the society. I mean, it's below 50%, but it's still the party that is the biggest party in terms of representation in the country. So it still sees itself as the leader of society. So this is an opportune moment for it to start going back to what made it the leader of society. So what is it that made the ANC reconnect with the masses, with the communities? So that moment, in fact, for me, I think they need to use, because they are in a very difficult situation for the first time in 30 years. So they are way, way, way below 50%. So are you still going to do things the same way you were doing things, seeing that you were declining? Or this is an opportunity. The ANC has always branded itself as the parliament of the people. So it means it represents everyone. So people have said to you, well, we understand you still represent us, but we are very unhappy. That's why we're taking some of our votes away.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the opportunity. 113 years old. You reaffirm who you are. So where do you want to take us? Where is it going wrong? Can you fix it? That's what's going to be happening tomorrow. And I think we'll hear the ANC president start to speak about those things. But the key message, Sim and Doc, will be on Saturday. For me, that message, if it's the same old, clearly they would not have learned anything. But if the message from the 11th, that message is a message of hope, is a message of reassurance, perhaps that would be the start of renewal.
Okay, and with the ANC hosting the celebrations in the Western Cape, are you hoping that that particular decision would influence support at the local level as we're going to the local government elections? Yeah,
I think maybe something also to clear. This is rotational. That's what the ANC does. So they rotate it. Right. So every province gets to host the January 8th. Yeah. So they last held it there in 2015. So in fact, I was actually talking to my colleagues, just counting all the provinces, because I can still remember them by head, you know. So it's basically to rotate as part of their tradition. But at the same time, they have declined hugely in the Western Cape. So they need to obviously reconnect with those people to say, listen, this is where we are. We need to do things differently. So that's why I'm saying what they will say and what they will do will matter. But if it's the same old, it means they may not have learned anything. Yes.
Dr. Ndou, what do you think about that? What are the key messages, or what's the key message or the major selling point that the ANC will be selling in this weekend celebration in trying to restore their majority and just trying to endear themselves with the South Africans?
It's crunch time for the ANC. My view is that the ANC's message has to be totally different from the messages that they've delivered in the past. Having not performed well in the May general elections, the ANC has to reconnect with the people on the ground. The ANC has to focus on rebuilding. The ANC has to do a very thorough analysis on what has made them to go below 50%, and therefore be able to regroup and bring all the people together and still regroup and become stronger like before. But also, the ANC has to ensure that their deployees in the different levels of government perform in a manner that is satisfactory to the ordinary citizens. At yesterday's Joe Slovo's commemoration, Solima Paila had to indicate to the president a number of municipalities that are run by the ANC that are not doing well. So it's in the hands of the ANC deployees to ensure that they regain the trust of the people on the ground, but also ensuring that those members of the ANC have to regroup and do much hard work to ensure that the ANC has to regain the lost ground.
And speaking of regaining the lost ground, especially in the provinces that it doesn't have support anymore, do you see, or rather do you foresee the ANC entering into coalitions with perhaps the SACP, as it were?
The SACP, it has always been an ally of the ANC. So that could be very easy for the ANC to enter into a coalition with the SACP anyway. But I think what the ANC would love to see is for them to get the majority so that they are in charge. It might not be easy because history has taught us that where the ANC has lost power, it becomes very difficult for them to regain that power. And that's why I say this is crunch time for the ANC. They need to bring in new strategies, new energy, but also ensuring that the trust that is lost is actually regained again by the ANC itself.
All right, gentlemen, great chatting to you, Dr. Ndou, and Mzwandile Mbeje, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Well, that was Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC News Political Editor, and Dr. Levy Ndou, Political Analyst, talking to us about this weekend's ANC's 113th anniversary celebrations and the January 8th statement that is in the Western Cape.